please don't panic. These guys are going to be all right. If anything, I think some of them are set up to legitimately win leagues this year, even if they had poor week one performances. Now, Drake London didn't have a poor week one performance, right? Like if we're going to go through, if we're going to look at his total fantasy points, maybe it was a little disappointing, 13.5 points, but the underlying volume that you had was incredible. You had Drake London coming through with 15 targets. Now, what's insane about the 15 targets from Drake London is this is a receiver that went down at the end of the game. Obviously, if he had the touchdown, it would have been a much bigger performance. Anybody watching this game would have seen that. But if we go through and we actually look at the routes that Drake London ran this week, he ran 39 routes and he drew 15 targets. So for him to have like 40% of his routes turning into a target, this tells me that he is going to be at the very top of the NFL this year when it comes to his overall market share numbers, which is very reminiscent of what we had his final season at USC way back when he was in school. And now I want to remind y'all, as I always do, that Drake London is so young that he is younger than some rookies that just got drafted, such as RJ Harvey and Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt. If I'm going to go through and try to project this out going into the future, it is very important to at least acknowledge that Drake London right now is not 100% healthy. And for that reason, I'm going to have Drake London down inside the same tier with Jaxon Smith-Njigba and Brian Thomas, who we'll talk about later in this video, where he'll be a tier B wide receiver for me, but a very safe top 10 option rest of season in points per game. And right now, if I just go through and do some research from what Twitter doctors are saying, they are telling us that Drake London is more likely than not going to still be playing week 2 with this shoulder injury, and then in the long term should be completely fine. If I'm using flockfantasy.com to actually see some recent trades done with Drake London in fantasy leagues, somebody traded Devonta Smith, Jerry Jeudy, Javonte Williams for RJ Harvey and Drake London. I would look at this, go like, hell, I'd rather have RJ Harvey over Javonte. I would way rather have Drake London over the combo of Jerry Jeudy and Devonta Smith. We saw somebody trade Chase Brown and Ted McMillan for Drake London and Amari Hampton. I think this trade's definitely a lot closer. I'd view London very comparably to Chase Brown rest of season, and Ted McMillan versus Amari Hampton, I'd probably rather have Hampton. And then the last deal we are going to pull up will be somebody who was able to trade Ted McMillan as well as Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt, who you know I have in the Flock League. I'm really hoping that he crushes rest of season. But to get London, you are up tiering to such an elite player that I think you have to be willing to trade the running back 3 with upside. Now, moving over to what we have with the next wide receiver that I feel like we really need to talk about, he will be in this same tier. And very similar to Drake London week 1, Jaxon Smith-Njigba showed us that he can be a top 5 wide receiver in fantasy this season. And very similar to what we had with Drake London, just to a further extent, we had JSN dominating the market share numbers. Sam Darnold had 150 passing yards and 124 of them went to Jaxon Smith-Njigba. We go through and we look at the target volume that he had. There were 16 completions in this offense, and JSN accounted for 9 receptions. JSN had over 50% of the targets in this offense. He had over 90% of the air yardage share. So the only player that was involved as a receiver in terms of throwing the ball down the field in Seattle was Jaxon Smith-Njigba. And we go ahead and we try to project this out into the future. And while, of course, I can look at what sportsbooks are saying this week, where they are telling us that the Seattle Seahawks should be one of the worst offenses in the NFL. And I think this is going to be a bad team. Don't get me wrong. I mean, Sam Darnold was not inspiring whatsoever in week 1. I do think that Darnold's going to be better in the future. I think that we are going to have more than 150 passing yards per game from Sam Darnold. I think we're going to have more than 16 completions per game from Darnold. And I think he'll occasionally score a touchdown. And if the market share numbers from a young ascending elite prospect tells us anything, Jaxon Smith-Njigba should have a lot of those touchdowns. So again, I'm ranking him as a top 10 wide receiver. If you drafted him in round 3 of your draft, congrats. This guy maybe should have gone at the very beginning of the 2nd round. And if we go through and look at some recent trades that were completed with the trade finder on flockfantasy.com, just to give you an idea of maybe what you should go out there and try to offer for JSN if you can. Somebody traded Devontae Adams and Terry McLaurin for him. I would absolutely love to get that 2-for-1 tier up. Somebody traded Josh Jacobs and Kyle Pitts for Jaxon Smith-Njigba and Trevion Henderson. Now, I have Josh Jacobs in the flock league, and I would value Josh Jacobs very similarly to what I would with Jaxon Smith-Njigba. However, I would way rather have Trevion over Kyle Pitts, so that's a clear win. And then somebody made another 2-for-1 deal where they sent Keon Coleman and Calvin Ridley for JSN. Now, go pull that into the trade calculator on flockfantasy.com. They'll say you're robbing them. That trade's almost never going to get done. But what could have saved this person is literally just putting it into the trade calculator on the site. I promise you that the trade calculator on flockfantasy.com will save you from making garbage trades. Hopefully, it will help you rip a league makeoff or two. But realistically, it is the most valuable resource for you to make trades during the season, where we have spent so much time and money investing into it. And it is the most accurate trade calculator you're going to be able to find. It can correctly identify the value that you get with the true top-end names like Drake London and Jaxon Smith-Njigba versus just the wide receivers that are pretty good like DK Metcalf. So make sure you're using it. Also, you can use the trade finder to get yourself ideas for fantasy football trades. I'm going to leave the link to flockfantasy.com in the description and the comment section. And both the trade calculator and the trade finder are completely free. Now, moving over to our next wide receiver, I need to talk about T. Higgins here just a bit. Opposite end of the spectrum, I know, where JSN and London, they dominated week one. And T. Higgins, he did not look good. I mean, if we're going to just see the volume for Higgins, he had 4 targets out of 23 Joe Burrow pass attempts. Joe Burrow only had 14 completions. I know you've already seen the stat of how bad the Cincinnati Bengals offense was in the second half, where they had like less than 10 yards gained. It was insane. I've never seen anything like it, except with the Cincinnati Bengals last year in week one, except with the Cincinnati Bengals the year prior. They do this every year in week one. We go back, and while, yeah, they maybe only scored 17 points in week one this season, the year prior, they only scored 10. The year before that, in 2023, the Cincinnati Bengals scored 3 points in week one. You go back to 2022 is the last time they scored 20 points in a week one game, and that game had to go to overtime for them to. So across the board here, we've seen the consistent trend of the Cincinnati Bengals being garbage in week one at the beginning of the season and improving as time goes on. Now, I would think that this team could maybe do something about it. Clearly, something's going on in camp. I mean, they went out there and they tried to play their starters a ton in the preseason to see if that was going to fix the problem. And frankly, it didn't. But if I'm projecting this going forward into the future with T. Higgins, nothing has changed in my mind. It's still going to be the Jamar Chase, T. Higgins show. Higgins was still a top 12 wide receiver in points per game last year. While, yes, they held the Cleveland Browns to less than 20 points scored in week one, do I think that this is a good defense? No. If you look at the projections going into this next week, sportsbooks are putting the over-under for the Cincinnati Bengals Jacksonville Jaguars game as the highest scoring game of the week. What did they do that with last week? What game did they say was going to be the highest scoring game? Oh, the Buffalo Bills and the Baltimore Ravens. Sportsbooks may or may not know what they are doing with this. So sportsbooks are telling us, don't you worry, the Bengals defense is still garbage. The Bengals offense is still very good. So if you got any type of discount with one of these Bengals players, whether that's going to be T. Higgins, whether that's Chase Brown, obviously I'm assuming you can't get a discount on Jamar Chase, but regardless, I would go for it. Now, I wasn't planning on talking about him until later in the video, but we have the same exact thesis with Jameson Williams. Now, with Jameson Williams, I can show you some of the PFF snap data where we can see that he plays a career-high snap rate effectively in week one. This is the offensive coordinator that's come out and they've told us, hell, Jameson Williams, he's our guy. Jameson Williams was the best player at camp, blah, blah, blah. And he ran 43 out of a potential 43 routes in week one. He ran around on every single Jared Goff drop back. And you could kind of assume that that was going to happen when they decided to pay him $83 million. Yes. Go look at what Nico Collins is getting paid right now. Jameson Williams is getting paid more than that. And while, yeah, the Detroit Lions, they were completely incompetent against the Green Bay Packers week one. And I'm sitting here going, oh, okay, I guess that it's all Ben Johnson, right? Ben Johnson was the magic. And now that he's gone, this offense is going to be garbage. But if we look forward into the future, and we take a look into the crystal ball, which is sportsbooks that have more data, that have more knowledge than all of us. What they are projecting right now will be the Washington Commanders to not put many points up on the board on Thursday. And they are projecting the Detroit Lions to go back to being a top 5 offense in the NFL this week. So while the Detroit Lions offense was garbage last week, while Jared Goff had 225 passing yards and this team had 46 total rushing yards, I think that this was almost more of a factor of the Green Bay Packers looked to have the best, and I mean the best defense in the NFL this season. So really tough matchup. Everybody and their mom is screaming about Ben Johnson being the reason that this team was ever any good. And honestly, I think that this is going to give you the buy low moment that you can get on Jameson. Looking at where I have him in my rankings, I have him wide receiver 30 in the same tier as Rice, Flowers, Devonta Smith, George Pickens, DJ Moore, Jameson, and Calvin Ridley. So when I look at some of these trades, like, yeah, I would flip Deebo Samuel for Jameson Williams. Yeah, I would sell Ja'Cory Cross-Merritt for DeAndre Swift and Jameson. That person should have used the trade calculator so they didn't ruin their team. But more importantly, like a trade that I would love to make is like, pivot from somebody that's in the same tier over to Jameson Williams and pick up another piece on top. So somebody traded Zay Flowers for Jameson Williams and Jerry Jeudy after week 1. And I look at that and go, yeah, well, I think that Flowers, while I'd rather have him over Jameson rest of season, they're not that far off. So if you can get another piece, I'm going to go for it. Now, the next receiver that I want to talk about is going to be Rashee Rice. Now, I know we never talk about the suspended guys, never talk about the injured guys in these videos because when we're making weekly projections, they're just simply not playing. But that typically opens up a buy window moment on them because you're looking at their owner having to submit their week 2 starting lineup, seeing Rashee Rice down there on their bench and not necessarily giving him the credit that he deserves. And Rashee Rice, if he was playing right now after the Xavier Worthy injury, we would all be talking about him as a top 5 wide receiver in fantasy. If Rice was going to play this week against the Philadelphia Eagles, he would be in my top 10 wide receiver rankings. Now, am I going to rank him there rest of season? No, because I don't know for 100% fact that Worthy's out for the rest of the year. And on top of that, you still have to wait another 5 weeks for Rashee Rice to come back. So I have Rashee Rice ranked wide receiver 25, but every week that goes by, where he's 1 week closer to returning, his price is going to increase. We go over and we look at what we have with some of the recent trades. Somebody traded George Kittle, Jalen Waddle, and Ollie Gordon for Rashee Rice. And maybe that seems like a lot, but George Kittle on the IR is going to be out at least 4 weeks. Rashee Rice is only going to be out 5 more. So Kittle, Rice, same timeline. Jalen Waddle doesn't look startable right now, so Rice looks to be in a really good spot. Somebody traded Kenneth Walker, Josh Downs for Rashee Rice, Quinshon Judkins. I'd rather have Rice right now over Kenneth Walker in a committee. Somebody traded Ja'Cory Cross-Merritt and Mark Andrews for Rashee Rice. Mark Andrews may not be worth the roster spot. And hell, I would trade Ja'Cory Cross-Merritt in a heartbeat for Rashee Rice in the Flock League. So with the Worthy injury, I think that this may be the time to add Rice to your watch list and maybe send out offers after week 2 when people are really focused in on, hey, what's my week 3 lineup looking like? Now, a couple players that I want to hit on quickly. DK Metcalf, I started this week and I was extremely frustrated. But if anything, maybe we could be more excited about Metcalf going into the future. Because what was the hesitation on DK Metcalf specifically? The main hesitation that people had, and keep in mind, I told you not to draft DK Metcalf. I got stuck with him in round 5. But the main hesitation people had were, oh, this is going to be one of the worst offenses in the league. This is going to be one of the worst offenses in the league. Well, Aaron Rodgers just had 4 passing touchdowns. We go ahead and look at the Pittsburgh Steelers this next week. They have an implied team total of 21 points, well ahead of the other garbage offenses, such as the Tennessee Titans, the Cleveland Browns, the Seahawks, the Panthers, the Saints. Like, the Steelers don't look to be in that bucket anymore now that Aaron Rodgers has been able to breathe some life into this team. And I'm not expecting Calvin Austin to lead the team in fantasy points every week. I don't think the Steelers are paying DK Metcalf top dollar for that to be the case. I'm not expecting Ben Skoranek, his 1 target, to be the touchdown. I'm not expecting Jalen Warren to get a receiving touchdown. I'm not expecting Jonnu Smith to get a receiving touchdown every week. Realistically speaking, I'm more excited about the Pittsburgh Steelers offense. I still think that Metcalf's going to have a high target share in this offense. He had 7 targets out of a total of 29 Aaron Rodgers pass attempts. So Metcalf, I think that he was questionably a high-end wide receiver 3 for me before this week, but actually after seeing Rodgers perform well, I moved him to wide receiver 24. Now, typically I'd like to give you some tight end targets as well, and we can, of course, keep talking about Tyler Warren. I've spent freaking all offseason talking about Tyler Warren at this point. Early in the offseason, he was my most drafted player on Underdog, which absolutely loving that. Now it's Quentin Johnson instead, which loving that as well. But instead, I wanted to mix it up because realistically, when I am looking at my tight end rankings, and I talked about this in the live stream the other night, I rank my top 4 guys. I'm going to go Bowers, McBride, then we're going to go with Laporta, Tyler Warren. And then obviously we have George Kittle at 5 on the IR. I can't move Kittle any lower than that because tight ends 6 through 20 are all the same. I think maybe TJ Hawkinson is tight end 6 in my rankings right now. However, if you told me, Mason, you're an idiot, Juwan Johnson needs to be ranked ahead of him, Hunter Henry needs to be ranked ahead of him, I'd go, you know what? That could be true. So there are so many tight ends that are complete question marks that I have no idea how to project. Whereas, you know who I know how to project? I know how to project Trey McBride. If you are playing in a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex league, there is nothing better that you could do right now than sell wide receiver depth for that elite tight end that we know we can rely upon every single week. Y'all know I'm reviewing fantasy football teams every single night in the live stream. I'm answering your questions every single night in the live stream. And so many times I see one of your rosters where I'm like, oh crap. Yeah, if you're telling me that Devontae Adams is our wide receiver 4, can we go through and trade our wide receiver 2 for Trey McBride? Like realistically, seeing week 1, I understand that Marvin Harrison, he has the long play, he has the big touchdown, everybody's all excited. You know who led the team in targets? Trey McBride. Trey McBride had 9 targets. It's like clockwork. Exactly what we had last season's happening this year. Trey McBride's going to be up there with the very top wide receivers in the NFL with his total targets. He's going to be one of the very few players that you can rely upon. So for me, whenever I see a league where you only start 2 receivers in a flex and you're loaded at the wide receiver position with a ton of depth underneath, I would like to take that wide receiver like Ladd McConkey and do what I can to upgrade our current tight end position and make a trade like Ladd McConkey and TJ Hawkinson to go get Trey McBride. Using the trade finder, actually, we even saw something like this. Somebody traded Ladd McConkey and Kyle Pitts for McBride. I'm going through and looking at some other deals. Somebody traded Garrett Wilson, Devonta Smith, Evan Ingram for McBride. Hell, I know that seems rich, but I'm doing it. Evan Ingram is almost a 0 for me. Somebody traded Bowers and the Chiefs running backs, and I don't know if either Chiefs running back startable at this point, for Trey McBride and Rashee Rice. Give me McBride, because I think, honestly, at this point, McBride and Bowers are about the same with the Bowers injury, and I'd way rather have Rice over the Chiefs backs. But I think that's all I got for you. I really hope I was able to help you out. And again, if you have these receivers, just want to make sure you know you're going to be good. Hold on to these guys. And honestly, with some of these names, if you don't have them on your team, I wouldn't mind going out there and throwing out some feelers and trying to make a trade for them if it's a reasonable price. Now, of course, if you needed help figuring out what a reasonable price is, you could always use the free resources that we've worked so hard to bring you with the trade finder and the trade calculator on flockfantasy.com. In my opinion, there is no trade calculator that you could possibly find that's more accurate. We've spent so much time, so much money investing into it for you. It's free. The link's in the description, the link's in the comment section. And yeah, that's all I got for you. I really appreciate you and really hope I get to see you out in the live stream later tonight.